Hello, it's Keith here, and this is lesson 75 of the platform-specific series of my 650 assembly programming tutorials. We're looking at the Atari 2600 today, and what we've got is we've got a combined example. We're going to basically use the joystick. We're going to read in from the digital joystick, and we're going to use the values from the joystick to configure the various options for the sound, and so we're going to use those to generate some sound. Now, we're also showing the contents of those sound registers to the screen using the play field, so the various bits are being shown on the screen here, and that's why you've got these vertical bars, because the playfield registers only set the bits once, and so unless we change it each raster line, which we've not done here, we end up with a vertical line. Now if I press up and down, we're changing the values in the control register. Now the values in that register are a little bit weird, but they effectively are kind of like the instrument. They're the different kinds of tone that we can make, and so we can select them there and find one that we actually like. Now the frequency register takes a value of 0 to 31, and this is the pitch, and basically 0 is the highest pitch. And then finally we have the volume. Now here I've got it set to the fire button. If I press the fire button, we'll go from low volume to high volume. And a value of 15 is the loudest, and a value of 0 is the quietest. Now, the Atari 2600 has a total of 2 channels, but they're actually both mono. It's not left and right. It's just 2 different tones that can be made at the same time. Each of these has 3 registers. These are all in the 0 page. Now, the 0 page, unlike most systems, because the Atari 2600 only has 128 bytes, yes, bytes of memory, those are in the top half of the 0 page, also duplicated in the stack area, but the bottom half is actually hardware mapped registers, and so 0015 or just 15 is the control register for channel 0. 16 is the control register for the channel 1, and they select the tone using 4 bits, so 16 possible options there. I believe 8 is basically a noise tone, and 4 is a fairly pure tone, but there's other options there as well, which will create the interesting sounds that the Atari 2600 is famous for. We then have the frequency, a value of 0 to 31, 0 being the highest pitch, as I said, and those are for channel 0 and 1 again. We're using registers 17 and 18 in the 0 page, and 19 and 1A are the volume. So for the two channels, and 0 is basically silent, and 15 is the loudest there. So yeah, we've got lots of flexibility there. A very easy way of working with the fairly limited, but as I say, fairly famous sound of the Atari 2600. I've never owned a 2600, but as soon as I heard the sounds that this was generating, you sort of reminisced for the sort of games you've seen that use those sounds, because it has very distinctive sounds because of the limitations it has. So that's the sound hardware. What about the joysticks? Well, the Atari 2600 actually has analog dials. That's not something I've used yet, and that's not something I'm covering here. But basically the way they work, I believe, is during VBlank they are reset, and that means that the dial will have a value ready to read, and then I think what you have to do is you have to read in from the ports for those dials and until the 1-bit value in there changes, and the time it takes before that value changes is the coordinate of that dial. That's the way those kind of things usually work anyway. But as I say, my tutorial being multi-platform, I always work with digital joysticks, and I convert the analog to digital, simulated digital if they are analog. But the digital is very easy to work with, to be honest. All we need to do is use port 0280, so not in the 0 page this time. The top 4 bits of this are the joystick 0, player 1's right, left, down and up in that order, and then the bottom bits are player 2, joystick 1. So very easy to read in. We just read in the bits there and process them accordingly. A value of 1 means not pressed, and a value of 0 is pressed, by the way. That's common with these kind of joysticks, so they go low when the button's been pressed down. So that's our up, down, left and right. And then for the fires, the 2 fires, we simply use 2 different addresses, 3C and 3D. The bottom bits of those are the 2 fire buttons that go with those joysticks. Very straightforward, which is why I've combined the 2 into the same example. Let's go over to the code, let's check it out. Okay, so here's our example. We've defined some entries within the 0 page here, within the hardware here, and then what we've got here is some memory that we're using to store the values that we're going to send to the sound hardware. Now, we've also got a timer here, just so that this didn't go completely crazy. I'm basically slowing down the processing of the values so that we've got some delay when we press things. Here is our main loop, basically. what we're going to do is we're setting up the screen here. We've got the various bits that we're going to send to the hardware registers here, and we're masking them so that we've only got the relevant ones that actually have an effect, and we're showing those to the screen here. We're going to repeat as our screen draws and do our VBlank here to generate the screen. If you don't know how to generate a screen on a Atari 2600, see the playfield tutorial. And then that's what we're doing now. The actual code that does the job of making the sounds and reading the joysticks is all in this do game tasks here, which is up here within the VBlank area. So that's doing all of the dirty work. Now the first thing we're doing is we're using this time tick here, and we're basically making sure that we're only going to actually process anything 1 in 16 times, so every 16 frames basically, because otherwise this would be responding too quickly and it would be very hard to actually sort of work out what was going on in a lot of cases, and we'd be changing our values too quickly. So in all the other cases we're skipping over the following code. The code first processes the joystick and changes the values within those 0-page entries we defined, and later on we send them to the sound. So first of all, we're reading in from port 280, which, as I said before, is the directions right, left, down and up in bits 7, 6, 5 and 4. And so what I've done here is I've defined some bit masks here, and we're going to use those with the bit command so that we only load the accumulator once. And we're going to test the various directions. So here we're going to check if the up button is pressed. Now if this value in that top bit is a 0, then the up button is pressed. If it's a 1, then it's not pressed. And so we're branching if not equals if it's not 0, and skipping over the command here, this dec command. So basically if up is pressed, we're going to decrement sound CTL. Otherwise we're not. If the down button is pressed, we're going to increment sound CTL, and otherwise we're not. And then we're checking for left and right here and changing the sound frequency accordingly. So that's how we're processing the up, down, left and right of our joystick, and we're changing these entries in the 0-page accordingly. Now the final one is the fire. Now we're going to use a value of 4 for quiet, because 0 would be literally silent. I think it would be certainly too quiet to hear. So we're going to use either 4 or 15 as our volume here. So we're loading that into the X register. We're then loading the accumulator from 3C in the 0-page, which is the fire button in input 4 there. Now basically, if this is minus, then the fire button is not pressed, and so we will skip over. If the fire button is pressed, if that's a positive, if a value of 0, because minus means that top bit is 1, then we're going to load a value of 15 here, and so we're setting the volume there accordingly. Now, in all of these cases, we could have sent this directly to the hardware, but I'm storing these in these memory areas here instead, and we're going to then transfer them to our hardware registers down here. So we're taking our control value and writing that to port 15 in hexadecimal, our frequency to 17 in hexadecimal, and our volume to 19 in hexadecimal. And after that, we're done. So those are using the channel 0. We could also use channel 1, or basically all we need to do is add 1 to those those register addresses. We could literally just add +1 to the end of each one of them. But here we're doing the exact same thing with the second set of registers. And the effect, of course, is exactly the same, because the second channel has all of the same functions as the first one, which is very convenient. Some systems, like the Nintendo Entertainment System, the different hardware registers for the different sound channels had different functionality, and it's a right pain to program, because you want to be able to use the two for the same kind of things in a lot of cases. It's all right if you've got 4 channels and the fourth one is a noise channel, but if you've only got 2 channels or 3 channels on the NES, and one of those is completely different to the other 2, and the other 2 have various limitations that are different to each other, it makes making music on multiple systems quite tricky. So I'd say quite impressed that they both have the same reasonably capable functionality, at least for a limited system like this. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen today. Go to the website, download the example and try it out. We're going to be doing some more Atari 2600. I've got another example where we're going to use the joystick code again. This time we're going to move a sprite around the screen, and as with most things on the Atari 2600, it's not as easy as we would like it to be, but it's still perfectly doable. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen today. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.